I've got some updated blood work and I'm going to share the results with you in today's video. My name is Jenny. I've been doing a carnivore diet experiment for the past 16 months and I've been tracking my progress through weight, measurements, DEXA scans, continuous glucose monitoring, blood work, and arterial scans. Today though, we're going to focus in on my most recent blood work at the 15-month mark, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the last 3 months of continuous glucose monitor data that I have. I share all of my blood work data with you because I want to educate people. I want to dispel the myth that you can't understand your own blood work. I think that you can. And I want people to feel really comfortable asking for specific tests with their doctor or to know where they can order these tests online for themselves. I order all of my blood work from ownyourlabs.com. I'm getting blood work done probably about once a month to share here on YouTube. And originally I went to my doctor, but I was having a really hard time getting her to order like even an A1C. So I decided to just take this into my own hands and order my blood work online, which in most states in the United States, you can do too. I'm going to put a link to Own Your Labs in the description below, along with a list of all the tests that I talk about in today's video and their current pricing. I've also got a coupon code listed in the description so you can get a discount on this blood work if you are to order it. I don't get anything from this coupon code. I just really believe in Own Your Labs, and I am very happy that this is a service that's available to me. So let's talk about the process real quick before we get into my blood work. So the price of the blood draw is baked into the price you'll see on ownyourlabs.com. So you're going to go in, you're going to pick the labs that you want, you're going to pay for them, and within a day you'll get an email from ownyourlabs.com with the order. You're going to print that out and then you're going to bring that to any Labcorp location. That is who does the blood draws for Own Your Labs. Now you can make an appointment with Labcorp or you can just do a walk-in, whatever works best for you. You're going to get your blood drawn and then within a couple of days you will get your results through the Labcorp online portal. It really couldn't be any easier. So now let's move into my blood test results. I got some, standard tests done, but I also got a couple of new tests that I've never done before. And then I threw in a couple of tests that I only do quarterly. First off, let's start with my lipid panel. I think everyone's always so concerned about cholesterol, and we're going to talk about my numbers and talk about the numbers on this panel that I'm actually concerned about. So first of all, my total cholesterol was 280. My triglycerides were 53, my HDL cholesterol was 76, and my LDL cholesterol was 197. So when I am looking at a cholesterol panel within the context of a high-fat, low-carb diet such as carnivore, the only thing that I'm looking at is the triglycerides. I want them to be under 100. I'm at 53, so that is awesome. And then I'm looking at the HDL cholesterol next, and I want that to be above 50. I'm at 76, so that is excellent. The LDL cholesterol of 197, for me, that varies a lot. Like I said, I'm getting blood work done every single month, so I see the variation in this. And this also is dependent on my body mass index, my BMI. Am I losing weight? Because I have found that as I have become thinner on carnivore, I've lost almost 45 pounds now. As I've become thinner, my LDL cholesterol numbers have been increasing. I believe that I have become a lean mass hyperresponder, which is a person that has very high LDL cholesterol within the context of a ketogenic diet, but they also have very low triglycerides and very high HDL. The range that I see in my LDL is anywhere between, at a low end, 146 is very low for me. And I have seen upwards of, I think 263 was the highest I've seen it. When it hit 263, I had lost 6.6 pounds that month. I had been doing daily 16 to 18 hour fasts and throwing in, I think I threw in a 24-hour fast in that month as well. And I had been doing some intense strength training and walking, lots of exercise. So head over to my 1-year blood work video if you want a full in-depth explanation of the lean mass hyperresponder bit and LDL cholesterol in general. My 6-month carnivore blood work video also has a very in-depth discussion on LDL cholesterol and why it's not something really to be worried too much about. I don't want to dive into all that here because we're trying to keep this one short and sweet, but those are my cholesterol numbers for this time around. So next up, I tested my iron and total iron binding capacity, TIBC. So my TIBC was 224, my UIBC was 153, iron itself was 53, and my iron saturation was 23. So the reason that I got this test done this time around was I had some weird fatigue issues in February that I had no idea what was coming from, and I first suspected iron deficiency because maybe a vitamin C deficiency. I don't know. We'll look at my vitamin C number here in a minute. And so I got it retested this month. I had supplemented with iron for a couple of weeks along with some vitamin C, and it really didn't make a difference in my fatigue, so I don't think that's what it was. I do know what it was now, but it was not iron. It was not vitamin C. But because I was supplementing with the iron, my TIBC number has declined. With my last test last month, it was 252 and now it's 224. And the reference range for this is 250 to 450. So what does that mean if your TIBC is low? That doesn't mean that your iron is low. What that means is you have an abundance of iron, and the molecule that is binding to that is called transferrin. That just means that all of the transferrin in my body is bound up to an iron molecule. So I've got some transportation issues. I really shouldn't have been supplementing with iron. Lesson learned. So my next round of testing, I'm going to do this same iron and TIBC test, and then I'm also going to test for ferritin. So if my transferrin is low, my ferritin is high, my TIBC is still a bit low, I should probably go and maybe donate blood or do some really vigorous exercise so that I can burn off some of that. But that was really interesting and something that I learned this time around. Next up, I did a heavy metals profile. This is a test that I've never done before, and I was really interested to just do it to get it out of the way. So they were testing lead, arsenic, and mercury. For lead, it was below 1. For arsenic, it was below 1. And then my mercury was 1.4. All of them are within the reference range. I really haven't done a ton of research on the heavy metals to see if having a 1.4 mercury level in my blood is negative. Sure, you don't want to have any of that stuff in there, but I'm not really experiencing any detrimental effects or anything. It's probably from the larger fish that I've been consuming. I do some smoked salmon in the morning, probably 3 days a week. Tuna when I have sashimi at a sushi restaurant probably once a month. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to do a little bit more research on that. I don't want to, say that I know something that I don't really know. If you have any ideas about what those levels should be or anything like that, please leave them in the comments below. I'm always trying to learn more, so I thank you for that in advance. Next up is my A1C, and that came in at 5.3, exactly the same as last month. Now, your A1C is a measurement of your blood glucose levels over the past 3 months. So it's a lot more accurate than just a fasting glucose, which is just a snapshot in time. You could have a really good fasting glucose when you get your blood work done, and you could still have a really high A1C, and that fasting glucose isn't going to capture all of that data. That's why the A1C is so important. And on Own Your Labs, I think it's like a $10 test. It's not an expensive test. With an A1C of a 5.3, that means that my average glucose levels are between 90 and 100. And when we take a look at my continuous glucose monitor data, we are going to see that reflected in the numbers. Next up is vitamin C. I like to get this tested because I'm running a little bit of an experiment. Right now it is 0.8. Last time it was 0.9, and that is well within the reference range. My next test that I only do quarterly is the hsCRP, or C-Reactive Protein. So for this number, I want it to be a 1 or less. If you're between a 1 and a 2, you're at a moderate risk of a cardiovascular event. If you are above 3, you're considered high risk for a cardiovascular event. That doesn't mean you're going to have a heart attack right away. It just means the risk is a bit higher. So I'm always aiming for below 1. This time around, I was a 0.35, which is a drop from the last time, a 0.62, but I see my hsCRP levels ranging between the 0.3 and the 0.7. So that's just kind of where it hovers. So that is excellent. Very happy with that. To finish up the blood work this time around, I got a new test for reticulocyte count. A reticulocyte count is a count of the immature red blood cells that are in your bloodstream. This is measured to determine if your bone marrow is creating enough healthy new red blood cells, and at 0.8, I am doing good. So I think all of my blood work is looking really good this time around. My cholesterol numbers pretty much stayed the same. The triglycerides went down a little bit. My HDL went up by about 8 points, but my LDL was almost the same. My total was almost the same. A1C stayed the same. I think the only blip that kind of changed a bit for me was the total iron binding capacity number going from a 252 to a 224, I think is what it was, something like that, which just tells me that I did not have an iron deficiency and I really did not need to supplement. So lesson learned, but that was the only kind of blip there. Like I said, I've listed out all of these tests in the description along with their price and a link to Own Your Labs with a discount code so that you can get some blood work done for yourself if you want to. So quickly, let's move into my continuous glucose monitor data. I use the NutriSense app. This is a non-diabetic continuous glucose monitor app. I've used them all. And NutriSense is the best. I always go back to NutriSense. I've been using them since September 2022, and they just have the best data, and they're very easy to use. Let's take a look at my glucose data from the past 3 months, basically the first quarter of 2024. For this time period, my average glucose was 87. Makes complete sense. My A1C is 5.3, so it falls in that range. My glucose time in range was 99% of the time. That just means that my blood glucose was between 70 and 140 99% of the time. The 1% of the time that it was not within range, it was not too high. It was too low. And too low. It's individualized on each person. So there's the ranges that are set at 70 as your floor, as your low point, but I can see my blood glucose occasionally overnight dip into 50 or 60, but I'm not having any kind of symptoms. That would be considered a hypo, perhaps, for somebody that's a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic. But for me, I don't have either of those conditions. I don't experience any issues with that. So that's the 1% of the time that I was out of range. It had dipped into the 60s overnight, but again, I had no issues. I didn't feel anything. I was sleeping. Next, we're gonna move into variability. My variability for this time period was 12. What I aim for is 15 or less. So typically my variability is between 10 to 12. And all that means is spikes and dips, spikes and dips. You wanna keep those nice and tight, because if you're having hardcore spikes, hardcore dips, hardcore spikes, hardcore dips, that can lead to detrimental long-term effects just over time. So you really want to keep that variability low. Under 15 is what I aim for, and this time around, I was a 12. For my sleep average, I'm averaging 82 overnight. That is excellent. And my morning average is an 87, same as my overall average. Now, I do experience, if you take a look at this graph on the screen, you'll see that I have some spikes going up into the 90s, into the low 100s sometimes, and that's called the dawn effect. Now, I have 2.5-year-old twin toddlers, so when I'm waking up in the morning, I'm being woken up by screams and cries. Sometimes, or it's giggles sometimes. It's not always like that, but I have a little bit of cortisol stress that kind of like, wakes me up. I think that is what's causing a lot of it. Also, they do still wake up overnight, so at that point, I'm typically either have been up since 4:30 in the morning because I couldn't get back to sleep, or I just haven't gotten the sleep that I need. So I think that kind of plays into the dawn effect. But that's pretty common. A lot of people have dawn effect. It's nothing really to be worried about. I think the overall trend is what's important. And my average glucose from the continuous glucose monitor data is 87, which is excellent. Now, I think after using NutriSense for the past almost 2 years, it'll be in September, it'll be 2 years. Using them for this long, of course, I'm sharing the data with you on YouTube. I don't think people need to wear one for this long unless you are like a data junkie like me, but I do think that most people would benefit from wearing a continuous glucose monitor for a month. Just see how different foods affect you, see how stress affects you, sleep. It's a lot of lifestyle related things. It's not just food that can give you spikes in glucose. Like I said, sleep, stress, hormones, weather. When I go into a steam room or a sauna, sometimes even the hot tub at my gym, I can see a big spike in my glucose. Working out gives you a spike in glucose. Now, spikes aren't necessarily bad, dips aren't necessarily good, and you're not really gonna know anything about that until you see the data for yourself. But I think once you understand your particular glucose levels, it's just another data point for you that you can use when you're making decisions about your metabolic health. I know personally for me, when I switched over to a carnivore diet, I saw some big dips in my glucose levels. I think my average was 100 before, then it dipped down to 80 to 87. I kind of hover in the 80s to low 90s. I saw my variability decrease from a 15 to a 10 to 12. So I wasn't like, metabolically unhealthy to start with. I had some weight that I needed to lose from the twin pregnancy, and I was definitely not at my best, but I was not pre-diabetic or anything like that. But even so, I saw improvements in my metabolic health, and being able to see the glucose data really helped me with that. I've linked to NutriSense in the description and given you a coupon code so you can give them a shot if you would like. I've used all of the other continuous glucose monitor apps out there, and I think NutriSense is the best because they give you the most data and it's the easiest to navigate. I do blood work videos every month, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of them. I also have a ton of carnivore diet content coming up for you. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.